On a larger scale, you can kind of map out the nervous system in animals. Cnidarians are interesting because they've got those two-way neurons, and they don't have anything brain-like at all. Their nervous system is organized as a nerve net that still somehow manages to coordinate the movements and the biological activities in the body without anything that's even remotely brain-like. Starfish don't have a nerve net, but they've got a nerve ring and then a radial nerve that runs down each arm. So for most starfish, that means there's going to be 5 of them. For some starfish, they've got a lot more than 5 arms, but there'd be a radial nerve running down each one. Again, there's nothing brain-like here, and it's really kind of astounding, especially when you see the behavior that starfish can exhibit, that they don't have any area where they're really, at least centrally, processing all of this information. They don't have any brain. With the planarian, it does have something brain-like, basically a collection of ganglia up here at the head end of the animal. Same with the leech, same with the insect. It has some ganglia in various places, but the major ones in the head. The mollusks have actually most of them have a relatively simple nervous system, not very complicated, but the cephalopods are the exception to that. They have a really sophisticated nervous system with multiple ganglia, and they, like an octopus, has basically 9 brains. It's got one for each tentacle and then a central one that coordinates all those actions. So it's hard to see how that works for a single individual, but it's hard to estimate how intelligent animals are, but people that study octopus behavior think that they are at least as intelligent as a dog, and maybe more so, but it's intelligent in a different way than mammals are, so it's really hard to understand it. So here's our typical mammal. So to remember, typical mammals are always humans. So you've got a brain, you've got a spinal cord. Those are the 2 parts of the central nervous system. And then branching off the spinal cord, you've got spinal nerves. Branching off the brain, there are cranial nerves, and you can see that they're innervating parts of the face. So the central nervous system, like I say, is the brain and the spinal cord. It's the central nervous system that is integrating sensory information coming in and generating the motor impulses that you need to be able to respond to that sensory information. And so, at the simplest level, that's all that the brain is doing. It's just, bringing sensory information in, integrating that information, and then generating motor impulses as output. Complex integration happens in the brain itself. Simple integration happens in the spinal cord. So the spinal cord is definitely part of the central nervous system, but it's also certainly working at an unconscious level. There's, our consciousness, whatever that is in the brain. It resides in the brain. It definitely does not reside in the spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system is all the nervous system that's outside of the central nervous system, outside of the brain and spinal cord. So you've got 12 pairs of cranial nerves that branch directly off the brain and 31 pairs of spinal nerves. And really, remember, we're segmented animals, so what you're seeing here with all these repeating pairs of spinal nerves you're seeing the segmentation of our body plan. And it looks like the brain basically developed as a greatly expanded and inflated region at the front end of the spinal cord. So those 12 pairs of cranial nerves probably have their evolutionary derivation as primitive spinal nerves in a primitive vertebrate ancestor. We can divide the peripheral nervous system up into 2 different divisions. The sensory division is carrying sensory information from sense receptors throughout the body back to the central nervous system. The motor division is obviously sending out motor signals, usually to muscles, but also to glands to make things happen out in the body. So it's the flow of information is from the central nervous system out, and we can divide up the motor division a bit more. It's actually a bit more complicated. So you've got, here's just a kind of a flow chart that I think makes it a little bit simpler than just trying to describe how this works. So you've got the sensory division, and you can divide that up into sense organs that sense the external environment, things like touch and hearing and smell and sight, that sort of thing, versus sense organs that sense the internal environment. And we have a lot of internal sensing going on. So your body is monitoring your blood pressure, your temperature, all kinds of things internally. The CO2 concentration in your blood, that stuff is all being internally monitored, and you are usually not consciously aware of it, although sometimes you are. So you also have sensors in tendons and in joints that sense the amount of strain on tendons and sense the position of your joints. So all of that information is internal. It's about your internal environment, but it's all being collected and sent back to your central nervous system. Now, if we switch over to the other side and look at the motor division, you've got the somatic nervous system, which is the part of the nervous system that you are consciously aware of. So the somatic nervous system is innervating segmented structures, things like skeletal muscles that you have direct conscious control over. The autonomic nervous system is subconscious, and that is divided up into two divisions, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic divisions that we'll talk about here in just a couple of minutes. And the autonomic nervous system is basically innervating unsegmented structures. So the only organisms that have this double motor nervous system, the somatic system and the autonomic system, are vertebrates and cephalochordates. So it must have evolved in the ancestor to those two groups, because that's the only place you find it. So like I said, the somatic system is innervating segmented structures. That's where you have direct conscious control. The autonomic system is innervating non-segmented structures, so things like the muscles in your GI tract, that sort of thing, where you don't have direct conscious control over it. Well, okay, and that's what we just said. The autonomic system is not under conscious control, and remember, it's divided into two divisions, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic divisions. When the sympathetic division is activated, this prepares your body for intense physical activity in an emergency. So it's getting you ready to go. The parasympathetic division conserves energy and promotes activities that you do when you are relaxed, you're not under threat, things like digestion. So when the sympathetic division is activated, it does a bunch of things, but it'll increase your heart rate, which makes your blood pressure go up. Your blood glucose is increased. The blood sugar level is increased because it's preparing you for emergency activity, so you need energy circulating that's readily available. The blood flow is diverted from your visceral organs like your GI tract out to your skin and skeletal muscles, because we're, things that we need to worry about for the long term, you don't need to worry about in an emergency. So we're diverting resources from there to muscles, basically. So the activity in your GI tract will be reduced, and sometimes they call this the fight or flight response. The parasympathetic division is energy conserving and basically allowing activities to happen that can happen when you are not under threat. So you could sort of come up with the same list, the list of effects, just by doing the opposite of what you just saw. This is sometimes called the rest and repose response.